All right, family, greetings. Welcome to another edition of Baba TV Every Time Fire. And it's my absolute honor and privilege to be before this mighty warrior right here, one of our icons, one of our political prisoners that has been freed. We still not free yet, but this elder warrior has been free from the belly of the beast since a year and a half since what is it, October 20th, 2021. After having spent nearly 50 years in incarcerated for a crime of killing one of two Harlem police officers back in 1971, 70, right in that area, of which he has maintained his innocence. And we know that COINTELPRO back during that time, 1969, 1970, 71. Hell, I was born in 68. A lot going on at that time. The COINTELPRO under J. Edgar Hoover and many was destabilizing all of our organizations all around us. I don't want to speak too much on this brother's history because there's a lot that I don't know, so I don't like to run my mouth. I'm just getting on the planet a few days ago. I would like to introduce, it's my absolute pleasure. I met the brother in Rochester not long ago. I had the privilege of meeting him through a brother of mine named Michael. Shout out to brother Mike in Rochester for connecting me with this brother right here. We have to document, this is a brother that is, he has a long portfolio during that time incarcerated. He got his BA degree in sociology. He got his BS degree in psychology, among other things, that under 50 years, even if he is guilty, I'm going to just say this of it, if he was guilty of killing the police, under New York state law is 25 years. But killing somebody, they gave him double that. And still, I think it was about 11 or 12 parole requests denied before they finally reluctantly, after one of the police's the wives came through in Long Island. I saw what she had to say, and she just put the judge and jury down on him like she didn't give a damn. She knew he was guilty, and for all she was concerned, he should rot and should never be let out because they basically were police, one of them white police officers. But looking at the time and what we living in now and seeing how the police is acting, we can't even say that was something that was 30 years ago or 50 years ago or 60 years ago, because we know from George Floyd and all of the rest of our brothers and sisters recently, this is an ongoing problem with the police department. And if you want us to respect you, you got to respect the damn law that you represent, because we have a right to defend ourselves. I just want to say that. Now, I've ranted long enough. Brother, please go ahead on and speak to our people on Baba TV today, sir. I'm going to shut my mouth. I'm done.
Thank you, my brother, for giving the opportunity to speak to your audience. I am Jalil Muntaqim, a veteran member of the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army. As you may mention, I did 49 years in incarceration, both in California and in New York. As the course of my being in prison, I continued to be an activist. I was an activist before I came to prison. I was an activist while in prison. I'm an activist now that I'm back out of prison. While I was in prison, I was able to be the first to create a national prisoners newspaper. It was called Armed Spirit. I was the first to have a petition submitted to the United Nations in support of political prisoners and the existence and for questioning the existence of political prisoners and prison systems across the nation. I was the first to have build a national organization from inside prison called the Jericho Amnesty Movement. It was in 1998 with the assistance of my good brother Baba Herman Ferguson, who's now an ancestor, and my great beautiful sister Sophia Asia Bukhari, who's also now an ancestor. So I am the last living living founder of the National Jericho Movement, a movement that supports the existence of political prisoners. If anyone wants to know how to get in contact, please contact National Jericho Movement.org and learn about political prisoners across the country. As a result of those work, I also was able to inspire our comrades to put together what we call the International Tribunal. This was in 1990, excuse me, that was in 2020, 2020, excuse me, 2021, where the International Tribunal was held at the Malcolm X Betty Shabazz Education Memorial Center in Harlem, where we had international jurors from nine countries, and nine international jurors come to the United States and listen to our charge of genocide. We charge the United States with genocide, bringing our case to the international community as we had been instructed to do by the great El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, Malcolm X. He has told us that as long as we keep our movement within the confines of the United States under the rubric of civil rights, that the United States will continue to control and basically utilize our struggle as a means to upheld their own false idea of being human rights advocates. And so for Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz said we need to take our movement to the international community and say there's no longer a civil rights movement, it is a human rights movement. And so that's what we did. Now let me make this point explicitly clear. Prior to our advocating to the international world about our conditions in the United States being genocidal, keep in mind that in December 17th, 1951, the great Paul Robeson, the great William Patterson, the great W.D. Du Bois filed a petition, the first petition to the United Nations charging genocide. This was in, again, December 17th, 1951, about 2 months after I was born. As you well know, the FBI, under COINTELPRO, the operations of the FBI, seek to prohibit that airing at the United Nations in Geneva. They refused to allow Paul Robeson to leave the country. And although William Patterson did make it over to Geneva to present our case to the United Nations, they tried to prevent him from coming back to the United States. So 70 years later, we succeeded in what Paul Robeson, W.D. Du Bois, and William Patterson attempted to do in 1951. We was able to have an international body, international tribunal, to hear the charges of genocide against the United States. And they came back with a verdict. October 25th, 2021, the international jurors brought a verdict of guilty against the United States in conducting of genocide on 5 charges. 1, the police murders and state-sanctioned killing of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people. 2, mass incarceration of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people. 3, environmental racism. Our conditions of our communities often are found in hazardous polluted areas in cities and townships, right? Environmental racism. 3, health inequities. Why does white people live twice as long as Black people in this country? All right, because they have white skin privilege, right? And Black folks are often neglected in our the type of medical attention that we need to have. And 5, the existence of political prisoners in the United States. So for those 5, if you look at it accumulatively, those 5 issues, we find that, in fact, that the United States have been engaged in a process of genocide against Black people. I'm going to make another point to that. In the last 50 years, the Black people population has now risen from above 13%. Last year, from 11 to 15%. We have not risen in terms of the growth of our population. Why is that? Because there's this continuing decimation, right, of our population, right? And another example, mass incarceration. When you put we have 2.1, 2.2 million people in prison in the United States. The United States is the greatest, has the highest level of people incarcerated than any other industrial nation on the planet. Why is that? Why? Because the conditions of the United States prison system is based upon the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution. The 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution states this: slavery and involuntary servitude shall not exist except, or in this jurisdiction shall not exist except for those who have been duly convicted of a crime. What does that mean? That means in 1865, when they ended chattel slavery, they instituted penal slavery. We did not read the fine print. We did not read the fine print at the time the 13th Amendment was put in. So what we're doing today, we're making the fine print bold. The United States still engages in slavery. We, black, brown, and indigenous people, are the most individuals in these prison systems that are engaged, that have been conducted or being forced into compulsory labor, involuntary servitude, and slavery based upon the law. Two cases, Ruffin versus Commonwealth, and also Jones versus North Carolina Prisoners Union. The court stated emphatically, the court stated in black and white that prisoners are slaves of the state. Slaves of the state. That is the law, right? And so what we have in here is conditions that leads to what? Mass incarceration. Why mass incarceration? Because they are reaping exorbitant profits from the labor of prisoners, right? These incarcerated slaves. Massive profits from this labor, free labor for the most part, pennies on a dollar labor, right? And it's continuing to move this way, where states across the country are reaping exorbitant profits from free labor, compulsory labor, where people are compelled to work. Why I say compelled to work? Because if you don't go to work while you're inside these penitentiaries, you may not get out the cell, right? You may lose your commissary, you may lose your packages, you may lose your visits, you may be charged for failing to work and not be released from prison, right? I went to pro board 14 times. I was released on the 14th time I went to the pro board, right? Why? I refused to work. I refused to work in industry, and I refused to work in the mess hall, right? In these areas where they had slave labor. I refused, right? Because I understood the law. I understood the law that they would treat us as slaves. That's the reason why you find such horrendous conditions going on inside the prison system. Although the people that come inside, the young brothers and sisters come inside, they have no clue of the law. They have no understanding of the law, right? But those who run the prison system, they know the law. They understand the law. They know that who they have in their charge are considered by law to be slaves, and therefore they treat it that way. That's the reason why you had Attica. Attica in 1971, the Attica Rebellion, right? It wasn't a rebellion. It was a slave insurrection. That's when L.D. Barker told the news people, said, listen, we are tired of being herded as beasts. We are men, all right? Treat us as human beings, all right? And what they do, they slaughtered them. The state slaughtered them, slaughtered 41 people, including 3 of their own. You understand what I'm saying? And so since I've been released in prison in October 6, 2020, 2020, when I was released, I began back engaged in the struggle. And I now work for an organization called Citizen Action. I am the special project coordinator for Citizen Action, and I've organized what we call Friends and Families, Family and Friends of Incarcerated Workers. We are engaged in a campaign called 13 Forward. And 13 Forward, the goals and objective is to end penal slavery, to end the slave system of the United States. And so we're asking everyone who listens to this, right, listen to wherever you are in the country, right, build a campaign to end penal slavery. Build a campaign to acknowledge the fact that slavery still exists in the United States, that we've been duped, we've been hoodwinked, we've been bamboozled, as words of Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, right? Not understanding that they said they ended slavery. No, they have not. They penalized slavery. Right after, and give you another example, right after they ended chattel slavery in 1865, they came with new laws. What was the new law? A black code. Why did it come with black codes? So they create conditions leading people back into a slave penal system, right? After black codes, what did they have? They had Jim Crow, right? Jim Crow to keep the people divided, keep us divided from folks, right? Particularly from white folks, which I have no problems with, right? Divided from white folks, so that we can continue to be treated as inferior human beings, right? Keep in mind that we live in a system of white supremacy. Do we understand that? That we black people, brown people, indigenous people in this country have been navigating a system for white supremacy for the last 400 more years. For
Yes, sir.
indigenous people, 500 years of living and trying to negotiate our lives within a system of white supremacy. Why is that important to understand? Because white supremacy has to have an inferior group of people in order for them to feel superior. So therefore, they maintain a system to ensure that we are dealt with or are treated in an inferior posture, inferior sense of being, right? Second class citizen. How you gonna be a citizen and be second class? There's no such thing. If you're a citizen or you're not a citizen, right? And for us, it's always been one where they treat it as less than, right? And therefore, our condition has been one where we always had to resist the conditions of being treated as inferior to white folks or inferior to white supremacy. And so this is the gauge of struggle that we engage in today, right? We want to end white supremacy. We want to end capitalist imperialism. We want to end the conditions for which we, as a people, have been maintained into a system of inferiority, right? And we have to build a condition for which we began to satisfy our needs, satisfy our goals and objectives, satisfy who we are as a people in terms of our own identity. Our identity. Let's keep that in mind. Let's check that out. What that means by when I say identity. Who are we? Who are we as a people in this country? Right? We are so divided in terms of identifying ourselves. It is ridiculous that we can even try to move towards the conditions of building a national unity. I'll give you an example. When I was raised up, I was raised in the understanding that I am of African descent. Right? My mom, as a young woman, was a student of African dance, and she used to teach African dance to myself and my younger sister. Right? And her teacher taught her that we are African people. And so I was raised in the understanding, in terms of my identity, I'm of African descent. My mom did not let us be named or identified as being a Negro. What is a Negro? Right? Or being a colored person, or being a coon, or being the N word, or any other defamatory name that they try to impose upon us. And so it is extremely important that we begin the process for which we begin to identify ourselves, right, as opposed to being identified by others, right? In fact, the idea of being called or claimed to be an African American did not become vogue until Jesse Jackson started using the identity of an African American. Now, this is not to say that that has not been used prior to them, Afro American, African American, etc. Right back in W. Du Bois days or back in Hospital Shabazz days, etc. But we have never had the opportunity to identify ourselves as that, right? And so therefore, we are in many instances lost, right, in terms of our own identity of who we are as a people. And therefore, because we have not established ourselves in terms of identity, we don't understand our relationship with other peoples, right, outside of what they call it, black folks in this country, right, other Africans, other Asians, other Latinas, and other folks, right? What is our relationship with them, other than what has been imposed upon us by those who keep us in an inferior state of mind, state of condition? And so we have engaged in a process as a result of the verdict of the international jurors. We engaged in a process to divorce ourselves from a system that has been engaged in genocide. Again, like I said, esteemed by the international jurors has determined the United States has been involved in and engaged in genocide against black, brown, and indigenous people. And we are moving ourselves away from that. As a result of that decision, a result of that verdict against the United States, we're moving towards what we call a people's senate. We have to divorce ourselves from a system of genocides. We have to remove ourselves from harm, right? They've been harming us for the last 400 years. And so now it's time for us to move ourselves from that harm, from those conditions of harm. And so we're moving towards what we call a people centered. If you want to learn more about it, go to spiritofmandela.org/people centered. Spiritofmandela.org/people centered, and learn about the people centered, how we are building out this people centered. We're creating an alternative institutions to the institutions that have been governing us in a way that has been kept us in an inferior condition, socioeconomic and political condition. Now, what is also important about this is that we have to decolonize our minds. I say that deliberately. I say that intentionally. I say that with all forces I possibly can to to raise the issues that we as a people have been colonized, our mentality has been colonized, and as a result of that, we think as a colonized people. We think in a colonial mentality, right? And we have to begin the process of decolonize ourselves. If we don't decolonize ourselves, decolonize our thinking, right, we will not be able to decolonize our behavior, right? Another question, another issue was raised by El Malik Shabazz. He once raised the question, I think it was 1967, a speech that he made in 1967. He asked the question, who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught you that? Why is it that we are in conditions in our communities where we are killing each other? Right? Why is that? Why do we have this kind of apathy, this kind of self-hatred? Who taught us that? Right? At one point in time, because to call yourself black was like being a cuss word. Right? Who you calling black? I ain't black. I said, that's that colonial mentality where we lost our own self-identity. Right? And so we're in the process of resurrecting our identity, our Africanness, right? And in so doing, building towards our own independence, moving towards separating ourselves, divorcing ourselves from the system. I give another example. The great Martin Luther King Jr. in his speech to Other America, this is back in 1968, I believe it was, made this speech. He questioned his movement, the movement of integration. He thought perhaps he was making a wrong move, that he was ushering his people into a burning house, into a burning building, right? He began to understand that this system of white supremacy was not going away, right? We're not going to disappear, right? And that our call for equality was landing on deaf ears, right? And they were always creating new institutions, new kind of programs to ensure that the system of white supremacy was maintained, that it sustained itself, right, to the detriment of black people, brown people, right, who we call, right? And so for us, it is extremely important that we move towards the idea of decolonizing ourselves and build what we call decolonization programs. That's what we are calling for today, that in all our communities across the country, we have to build our own independent, self-sustaining decolonization programs for housing, for clothing, for food, for healthcare, and etc. As did the Black Panther Party when it was in existence. All right. Keep in mind that sickle cell anemia research started with the Black Panther Party. Free reference program started with the Black Panther Party. Buses going to prisons to assist families to see their loved ones inside started with the Black Panther Party. This idea of cop watch and etc., trying to protect our community, started with the Black Panther Party, right? Health clinics, started with the Black Panther Party, right? Housing the homeless, housing those, and fighting against landlords, Black Panther Party. Getting the drugs out of our community, interdicting the drugs out of the community, challenging the drug dealers, Black Panther Party, right? And keep this also in mind, Black Panther Party was a youth organization. It was young people. I was 16 years old when I joined the Black Panther Party, as many others did. Right, we was high school kids. We was young kids. First years, 2 years in college. Right, there was no one older than 30 years of age at the inception of the Black Panther Party. It was a youth movement, but we was determined. Right, we was dedicated. We had love for our people. Love for our people. Love for people to the extent where we was willing to sacrifice our lives for the sake of our people, for this fight against white supremacy and capitalist imperialism and capitalist exploitation, right? Where are they now? Right? Where are they now? Right? Where are these young people that we have to rebuild, right? Restore, right? Rehabilitate, right? Decolonize their mentalities to begin to have the kind of energy, the kind of love, the kind of desire for prosperity, for the better condition for our people, right? Now let me make this point explicitly clear, right? The Black Panther Party, original name was Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Why? Why do we have to name an organization for self-defense? Who are we defending ourselves from? What are we defending ourselves against? We understood back then that we was in war. We understood that there was a system in place that seek to challenge our very existence on this planet. We understood that. And we fought tooth and nail, right? Trying to create the conditions and rise our people up to a condition where we can have control of some of the resources of our communities, right? The resources of our communities. This is why decolonization programs is important, because they organize ourselves for the better benefit for ourselves, right? And that's important as well. And so for me, this campaign, I'm gonna go back to the campaign 13 Forward, right? To challenge mass incarceration, right? We have heard about this issue, the name mass incarceration, for several years now, right? Especially after Michelle Alexander put out her book, The New Jim Crow. And then the word mass incarceration became a household name in this country. But there has not been a program or a project that tried to challenge mass incarceration until now. And that challenge is 13 Forward, to end penal slavery in countries, in states across the country. So far, 8 states have removed the language of penal slavery, compulsory labor from out of their constitution. Right now, I'm in New York. We're working on making New York the 9th state. There are bills pending in California as well to do the same thing, to end penal slavery. Why is that important? Because to end penal slavery is a direct affront to mass incarceration. Why? Because you're taking the incentive out. You're taking the financial incentive out, right? Where they're putting people in prison and working them 10, 15, 20 years, free labor, reaping exorbitant profits. We say, no, not anymore, right? For now, we're demanding that our people inside be identified as incarcerated workers, right? We're going to change the name from prisoners to incarcerated workers. They have incarcerated workers. And we're going to demand that they get minimum wage, that they get fair wages for their labor. Fair wage for the labor. That's important, right? Why? Because it means that they have an opportunity to bring food, send money home to their children, send money home to their families. And why is that important? Because you'll find that one out of every three family, after someone in prison, goes into debt. Why do they go into debt? Because they got to pay for lawyers. You got to pay for the needs that these incarcerated brothers and sisters have, right? Incarcerated workers have. And therefore, oftentimes, they put their own families, their own conditions into debt, right? This is deliberate. This is intentional. It is purposeful, right? It is designed, right, to keep our community impoverished. And so they continue to reap exorbitant profits from our labor. We got to understand that, right? And so 13 Forward moves towards ending that condition, right? By demanding the system revert. First of all, recognize the fact that you're dealing in the system of slavery, penal slavery, and second of all, that penal slavery is against humanity. It's against international law, right? Not only is it against international law, it's against the moral imperative of who we are as a people, no other people enslaved, right? So this is what happened in 1865, right? The government understood there was a need for continue to reap profits to make money off people's labor. So when they ended penal slavery, when they ended chattel slavery, they instituted penal slavery. And then they started creating the laws and regulations to ensure people ushered in. This is the reason why we have mass incarceration. This is the reason why we have the school to prison pipeline. You heard about it. I know you heard about it. The school to prison pipeline. It's deliberate. It's intentional, right? To ensure that our schools have less the materials, less the conditions for broader education for our people, right? This suspension programs that they have inside the schools, where our kids get suspended twice as long as white kids when they get in trouble in the school. Why? Because if you keep a kid out of school 2 or 3 weeks, a month at a time, what's going to happen? He's going to go to the streets. Get caught up in the streets. And it leads right into what? School, the prison pipeline. Why are they going to the prison pipeline? Right? Because they can make profits off our labor. Understand this. It's deliberate. That's right. That's a fact. That's right. It's deliberate. That's what they're doing to us. And so for us, 1340 is an extremely important campaign because it challenges the idea of mass incarceration. It takes the incentive out. We are demanding our people be recognized as incarcerated workers. Why is that important? Because in the years the following, right, for those who do 2 years, 5 years, 10 years inside prison, right? And they get up in the morning, they go to work, they're not going to be adequately compensated for their labor, right? And they start identifying themselves as incarcerated workers. What's going to happen when they get out to the streets? When they go back home, right? They have that trauma of being a slave is slowly being removed, right? They begin to think of themselves as a worker, right? They begin to think of themselves as taking the responsibility and obligation of sending money home back to their families, to their young kids, to their children, right? To their wives, or their significant others, right? Begin to build the kind of responsibility that when they're released, what they're going to do? They're going to find a job. They'll go to work. Right? Continue the process of being that person they know they're supposed to be, should have been long time before the system denigrated, dehumanized, and degraded their value as a people. Right? Let me just make another point with that. About the art being degraded, dehumanized. As you know, back in 1968, prior to the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, he went to a sanitation worker strike in Memphis, right? And sanitation worker strike, if nobody studied it, you need to study that strikers, that strike. Very, very, very powerful strike that they had in Memphis. And what happened was that the people who was on the strike, right, the men who was on the strike, sanitation workers, they wore a body placard, a full body placard. And what did it say? I am a man. Why was that necessary? Why was that needed for them to say that? To make a public statement that this male human being determined that they have to be recognized as being a man. Because the system has been used to dehumanize, to degrade, and devalue the worth of that individual. Right? 40 years later, what we have? Hashtag what? Black Lives Matter. Continue to be dehumanized, continue to be degraded, continue to be considered less than, right, as a people. 40 years later, from 1968 to 2000, whatever, right? Hashtag Black Lives Matter. Who didn't know that? Who didn't know Black Lives Matter? Okay. And so we have to come to a point where we understand that we've been living in a system that is based upon the idea of white supremacy, right? That there were some of those of us who adhere to the idea of integration have assimilated into the system of white supremacy. Right? And this is the reason why we have to engage in the process of decolonizing our mind, decolonize our thinking, because they have assimilated, they have colonized mentality. They assimilate into the system. They believe it's best to go along to get along. Go along to get along. They go along with their own oppression. They go along to the conditions where they're being dehumanized and degraded. They go along to the point of division within our people as a nation, right? Being divided, class divisions, right? And therefore, we have to engage in struggle amongst ourselves to find points of unity. Well, there's one point of unity we must certainly understand, right? That we live in a system of white supremacy that is not going anywhere, and we need to remove ourselves from a system of genocide. Remove ourselves, separate ourselves from a system of genocide, create conditions that empower our community, right? And establish our relationship with others around the world who are also suffering the conditions of white supremacy. Now, let's take a little historical break, right? The idea of white supremacy is not new to this planet, right? As a matter of fact, it evolved out of the Catholic Church, right, in contemporary times. When I say contemporary, I was talking about it in 1492. 1492, the Pope Nicholas or Pope Alexander issued a papal bull called the Doctrine of Discovery. And he told the Spanish and the Portuguese who are adherent to their religious doctrine that they can travel throughout the world and they find anyone who's not adherent to their religious doctrine, they can be slaughtered. They can be annihilated. Or in the words of COINTELPRO, they can be neutralized. Right? And that's the reason why today we don't have the Incas. We don't have the Mayas. We don't have the Aztecs. We don't have the Arawaks. We don't have the Tianos. That's the reason why today many of the native indigenous communities of North America, or the original name is called Turtle Island, have been decimated. Right? Decimated. Right? These people have gone around the world. Wherever you find people of dark color, dark skin color, right? They enslave them or murder them. Right? This is a doctrine of discovery. And we don't understand the doctrine of discovery. We need to go study it. 1492, Doctrine of Discovery. Go read what it says. Right? Comes from the Catholic Church. Thank you, man. Comes from the Catholic Church. What all that means. All right? And so for us, it's important to understand how that has transitioned or how that transformed to today. There are two other doctrines that's reminiscent of the doctrine of discovery. The Monroe Doctrine is one, right? And the exception clause of the United States. The United States said they are exception to any other country on the planet. All right? But the Monroe Doctrine said that the United States can go into anywhere and police any place on the country, of the planet. Right? That's where the idea of imperialism comes from, right? Where they began to conquer other nations, other countries, colonize these other countries, as what's going on with Puerto Rico, or what's going on in the Philippines, or going on with Guam, or going on with the other countries that the United States has colonized in one way or another, either directly or indirectly by neocolonialism, right? The Monroe Doctrine, right? And the exceptionalism of the United States, that they are exceptional to any other people on the planet, right? What does it represent? It represents the idea of white supremacy, right? That's white supremacy being in practice, in operation. All right. And so we have a goal and objective to achieve, right? We're going to move towards building the People's Senate. And ask again, you go to spiritofmandela.org/People's Senate and learn about the People's Senate and join this process of decolonization. I ask that you also engage in the process of decolonizing your mind. And one other thing I'm going to ask you to do, right? I'm going to put in the chat as well, this book. All right, I'm an author of two books. One is We Are Our Own Liberators, and the second book is called Escaping the Prison, Fade to Black. I will put in the chat. Oh, they don't have it. Where's the chat at? I don't see it. Well, I'm asking my host to put in the chat.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it right in right now, brother.
Right, spiritofmandela.org, spiritofmandela.org/People's Senate. And for people who want to receive a copy of my book, they should go to blackdragonmme.com. blackdragonmme.com. And you get a copy, Escaping the Prison, Fade to Black. You can get that book from AK Press. AK Press has copies of that book, right? It's a book of essays and poetry. And We Are Liberators. You can get it from blackdragonmme.com. And in that book, We Are Liberators, you'll be able to learn how to develop decolonization programs and how we're moving towards building what we call FOLDINET, Front for the Liberation of the New African Nation. Now, a minute ago, or a few minutes ago, I talked about our identity, right? Who are we as a people, right? I identify myself as a New African, okay? Back in 1968, 500 revolutionary nationalists got together at a church in Detroit. The church was the church of Aretha Franklin, the great Aretha Franklin's father, right? Church, who was allegedly a Garveyite. Aretha Franklin's father was a Garveyite. He supported the ideas of Marcus Garvey, the greatest contemporary organizer of Black people that we know of today, right? Just make this point explicitly clear. Marcus Garvey organized Black people in Africa, in America, in Latin America, in the Caribbean, and in Europe, right? Particularly in Britain. Right? Yeah, more people organized in his organization than anyone. Right? And this is why he was a threat. This is the reason why that J. Edgar Hoover, who then was a young agent, targeted Marcus Garvey to be expelled from this country, to be imprisoned and expelled from this country, because he understood the power that Marcus Garvey had. And therefore, in the years later, when he developed what he called COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program, one of the points of COINTELPRO was to prevent the rise of a messiah, prevent the rise of a black messiah, because he knew that a black messiah could eventually create what they call a new Mau Mau. Right? What's Mau Mau? Mau Mau was those revolutionaries in Kenya that expelled the British out of Kenya, right, and made Jomo Kenyatta the first president of the country of Kenya. And they was afraid that Marcus Garvey, right, and those who come after him was able to create that kind of force, right, liberatory force. And therefore, that's the reason why the Black Panther Party was challenged by the FBI, right, for destruction, right? There was, as J. Hoover once stated, that the Black Panther Party is the greatest threat to the United States internal security, right? Black Panther Party, and the work that we was doing during that time, protecting our community, right, ensuring that we was building the basis for our what? Defense, self-defense, to preserve our existence, right? That was the course of the Black Panther Party. And the reason why Black Panther Party came under the kind of scrutiny that it did, leading to its undermining and ultimately to its destruction. I also keep in mind, and it's important for us to be able to criticize ourselves and understanding our own weaknesses and failures, right? And that one weakness and failure was this: because we were infantile, we are a young organization, enthusiastic. We believe in what we believed in, right? But we didn't have a full understanding to what extent the government would go to destroy our movement, our campaign. The United States used every tactic that they used to destabilize the country to destroy the Black Panther Party. Every tactic: infiltration, provocateurism, assassination, poison pen letters, every form that you can think of to destabilize the country, they used against us and the Black Panther Party to destroy the Black Panther Party. And that led to many of our comrades being either murdered, going to exile, or being imprisoned as political prisoners. And that's the reason why it's important for us to have organized the Jericho movement, right? Because if there's no movement that does not support its political prisoners, then it's a sham movement, right? Because the political prisoners are those who have the heart, the spirit of the movement. They were willing to engage and challenge the system of oppression. They got captured, but they weren't killed. And so therefore, while they was inside, they continued to organize, as I did, right, while we was inside. And so they created what they call PRESAT, right, which was a FBI program to make sure that those in the inside, political prisoners, right, were held isolated from the general population. Isolated from the general population. Why? Because they didn't want this idea of freedom, this idea of emancipation, this idea of abolitionists, this idea of liberation to be caught within the populations of these institutions, these slave institutions, these slave plantations across the country. Why? Because they understood that once those ideas became engendered into the population, that it inspired people to rebel. That's what happened in Attica, and many other people many other prisons across the country, right? And so this is our goal and objective today. For those who are, we continue to fight for the release of our political prisoners, and we continue to move towards the idea of divorcing ourselves, separating ourselves from a system of genocides, a system that has us in conditions, moribund conditions of poverty, right? Which is deliberate, right? And so that's the work that we're doing today. I have organized Family and Friends of Incarcerated Workers Committee in Rochester, New York, where I now reside. We have our legislators, majority of our legislators have signed on to 2 bills that we have pending in legislation that once these bills become effective into law, that will effectively end penal slavery in New York State, end compulsory labor in New York State, and we move towards ensuring that our people on the inside receive adequate compensation for their labor, for their work. And we began to make sure that they become part of the working class, right? Because we identify them as working classes, as incarcerated workers, and then we identify them as part of the working class. And we began to move towards them understanding the nature of our struggle, right, on that level, as workers, as contributors to the system, as contributors to the movement of liberation and independence. Uh, and so for me, it is important that we understand these goals and objectives, that we elicit our young people, our college people, our teenage students, right, to get involved with this movement, as we did back in my days, right? Uh, Note that our struggle is not a sprint. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon, right? And for each generation, they must be able to take their part in the struggle. They take this part in this marathon for liberation and independence of Black people, brown people, and indigenous people in this country. You have to, right? So when I'm ready to give it up, ready to pass the baton, right, in this marathon, in this relay race, right, I'm sure there has to be a hand there ready to pick up the baton and keep up the pace, keep up the fight. With that, I'd like to thank you again for having the opportunity to speak to your audience. If you have any questions, I am more than willing to answer any questions you have.
Whoa, powerful, powerful. Um, uh, Family in the chat, if you have any questions for our beloved brother Jalil Muntaqim, I will be putting everything in the description as soon as this is over with, how to get the book, everything. His contact information will be in the comments and in the description of this video as soon as it is over with. Baba Jalil, talk a little bit about, because you're originally from California, right? When did you come to Harlem? When did you come to Harlem?
Good point. Yeah, I was really born. I was born and raised in Oakland, California. I was born October 18th, 1951, at 3:43 a.m. in the morning at Kaiser Permanente Hospital. Right. I went to school in the Bay Area, San Francisco, and San Jose. Went to high school in San Jose, California. One of my mentors during the time of being in California during high school was John Carlos. Many of you may remember John Carlos. John Carlos was one of the icon pictures, him and Tommy Smith, when they raised their fist in the air at the 1968 Olympics, right? That's the era that I was raised in, an era where people was engaged in struggle on different levels, right? We all understood that we were in a fight for our own freedom, our own liberation and independence. And so as a result of my then at 16 had joined the Black Panther Party, by the time I was 18, I was recruited into the Black Underground. And in the Black Underground, it was necessity for us to move from place to place in order to engage those who are trying to annihilate our movement, trying to annihilate our struggle. And so in 1971, there was a meeting in New York where I had to attend this meeting in New York as a result of the split in the Black Panther Party between the East Coast, West Coast, Newton, and Cleaver split that was exacerbated by the COINTELPRO, creating divisions within our movement, creating provocateurism in our movement, diminishing and essentially seeking to destroy our movement. And so at the point in time, I was in New York at the time for this meeting, and that's when this incident happened on May 21st, 1971. They alleged that I was there, alleged that I shot these two police officers. We come to learn years later, after my conviction, right, that the weapon they claimed that I used in this case was not the murder weapon, not the murder weapon, right? They had a New York State ballistic expert by the name of George Simmons testify that he was the only one that did ballistic tests on the weapon that they claimed that I had used, right? The only one. Years later, we got our Freedom of Information documents, over 100,000 pages of documents. We come to find out that the case happened on May 21st, 1971. May 26th, the following week, J. Edgar Hoover was in the White House with Richard Nixon talking about this case, saying that Black Panther Party members should be charged with this case. We have the documents to prove that, right? We also got the documents that where we asked for, when our attorneys asked for discovery, right? Because every case you can ask for discovery to find out what is the materials that they have against us, right? The FBI called the district attorney's office and want to learn whether any of the materials that was rendered to our attorneys, to the defense attorneys, could that be identified as being FBI documents, or be identified as being what are called new kill documents. Let me make this point. And May 26th, when J. Edgar Hoover was in the White House with Richard Nixon, they discovered, or they determined, that they're going to have a code name operations to solve this particular killing, and it was called New Kill, which is derivative from COINTELPRO. Just as Chesarob was a derivative from COINTELPRO when they tried to chase down Assad Shakur, right? Chesarob, different tactics they used to try to suppress our movement. And so they, on May 26th, 1971, they came up with the name New Kill, and they did not tell the New York Police Department that the FBI was engaged in a process of trying to solve this case, or at least put this case on Black Panther Party members. All right. 19 years later, actually to the point of our prosecution, that the New York Police Department's investigative services find out that the FBI was also engaged in this investigation. Right. And so the DA told the FBI that the materials that they gave us in discovery could not be identified as coming from the FBI or be identified as New Kill, or could be associated to Richard Nixon, right? To the office of Richard Nixon, the crook Richard Nixon at that time. You see, so there's been a great cover up, right? As you will find, like the case of Mumia, Mumia Abu Jamal, right? His case, cover up. A case of Poindexter, right? Cover up. The case of Imam Jamil Al-Amin, a cover up, right? These are innocent people. We know that they're innocent. The documents show they're innocent, but they won't release them. They won't release the documents. They won't let them. In the case of Imam Jamil Al-Amin, a guy came forward and confessed, who meets the description of the person they said it was the shooter. Meet the description, confess, right? They won't accept his confession, right? Why? Because Jamil Al-Amin, right, was a known revolutionary, Muslim revolutionary from way back in the day when he was a member of SNCC, right? And then a member of the Black Panther Party, the minister of justice, minister of justice for the Black Panther Party back in the days, right? That's when they came up with a law, right, called the Rap Brown Law, right? But when he made a speech, I think it was in Cleveland, and after the speech they left, and the people had a riot, right? And they came back and said, "We want to make a speech, make a speech that results in inciting a riot or a disturbance of that nature. You can be charged with that riot, even though you're not in the country, even though you did not actually say for people to take those type of actions." Rap Brown Law, right? Yeah, he's in prison today, right? Right, because they knew he was an organizer, right? They knew that he was. And not only that, well, there's a little bit more than that, but I won't go into all of that. But the point that I'm making is here: people need to go to Jericho Amnesty Movement, learn about your political prisoners, learn to fight for them because they fought for us, right? We cannot abandon them, right? These are our soldiers, right? These are our leaders, right? And we need to make sure that they get released from prison. Again, like I said, it took me 14 times to go to the pro board in order for me to be granted release. But I fought every minute, every hour. Right? Every hour I was inside, right? I'll give you another example of the condition side of the prison system. I was able to have an approved program, an approved black study program. I used to teach black study while I was on the inside. An approved program. Now I started in 1851 program, right? And I raised it up weeks later, raised it up to 1966. What happened in 1966? October 1966. That's when the Black Panther Party came into existence. Now, keep in mind that the people I had in my class were generally, right, members of street tribes, right? The Bloods, the Crips, JD, Gangster Disciples, and others, right? Was in my class. And I'm teaching these young people, teaching them their history, teaching them their understanding. But when I started talking about the Black Panther Party, you know what they did? They shut the program down. Shut it down and put me in isolation for 4 months for teaching about our own liberation, teaching about our own history of resistance in this country, right? They will prefer the people on the inside continue to be gangsters and thugs, right? With this abhorrent mentality of self-hatred, than them to raise them up and become activists, become responsible human beings, those who will would be released to our community as an asset to our community rather than as a continual liability, right? It's deliberate, it's intentional, it's purposeful, right? And this is what many of our comrades on the inside, many of our political prisoners on the inside have to suffer, right? They have to suffer isolation, they have to suffer segregation, right? Because they want to move them out of the population because of what they bring to the population, right? They bring the history, they bring the representation of resistance, right? They embody the representation of resistance against white supremacy and capitalist imperialism, right? And so what they do, they lock them down, right? They try to destroy them while in prison, right? We was lucky to get Mutulu out before he passed away. We was lucky to get Sundiata Okoli out before he passed away. But there's many more had not. We was unable to get out because we're not built a movement strong enough to demand their release. That's the reason why people need to join the Jericho movement. That's the reason why people need to join the spirit of Mandela building towards the people's center, right? We're at war. Know that, right? Called LIC, low intensity conflicts, right? And this is the struggle that we're engaged in, right? And it's been going on for the last 400 years. This is why our population has not grown, right? Keep in mind that genocide is in whole or in part. In whole or in part. For those who do not know, I'm going to read from my book, We Are All Liberators, right? There's a section in there where I talk about genocides. And I just want to make people fully understand when we talk about genocide, what are we talking about? I want you to understand exactly what we're saying and the language of the system. Oh, I gotta find it. Here it is, right here. Right, here we go. I don't want to have dead air. Okay. Here we go. Okay. All right. First of all, let's keep this a point in terms of our identity. Everyone, this is Article 15, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it states that everyone has a right to a nationality, and no one has to be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality or denied the right to change his nationality. All right. I identify myself as New African. Okay. Let me go on. I'm gonna go back to that as well. Let me go to this point. Genocide. The 1948 Convention of Genocide states this. Right. Genocide means any of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, such as one, killing members of the group. We know they be killing us. Right? Every day, one of our people is being murdered at one level or another across this country. Two, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of the group. We know we've been traumatized, severely traumatized in 400 years of negotiating a system of white supremacy where we have been considered less than, right? C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Why we have not grown as a population in this country? The greatest people who have grown, the amount of people that's grown in this country, the greatest amount of people who have grown in this country is Hispanics, right? Not black people. Not people of African descent, but Hispanics. The population is growing. Ours is stagnant, right? D, imposing measures intended to prevent the births within the group. We know they've done that to us. Sterilization of our women, sterilization of Puerto Rican women. Right now, there's a case in a prison in California right now, where women have been charging the medical facilities for sterilizing them without their consent, right? Preventing the births within the group, and E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group, right? We know they've done it with Native Americans, right? With the indigenous people of this country, right? Removing them from their families, giving them to Christian missionaries, changing their names, cutting off their hair, changing their culture, right? Just decimating, right? Their nation, right? But not only that, but look at the foster care system in the United States today, right? The foster care system. Majority of individuals in foster care system are Black and brown people. Majority of young people, children, Black and brown people. They're destroying families in order to create that condition. It's deliberate. It's intentional. We've been harmed continuously, right? It goes on to say, the Article 3 further states that following shall be punishable: genocide, conspiracy to commit genocide, direct or public incitement to commit genocide, attempt to commit genocide, and complicity to commit genocide. Now, the United States has in these books, because they are a treaty partner to the 1948 convention, the Genocide Convention. They're a treaty partner. They're a signature treaty partner to that treaty, right? And so you go to 18 USC 1091, right? Look it up. Federal law 18 USC 1091, and what you'll find in it, the same language that you find in the International Convention. It's federal law, right? To oppose the commission of genocide. Now, you know damn well the United States is not going to charge itself with commission of genocide. They won't, but we will. Right? We will, right? And so we're in the process, as part of the Bill of the People Senate, to file charges against the United States, right? Of commission of genocide against international law and their own federal law. And their own federal law. And part of that process of doing so is to raise consciousness, to raise understanding of what we have been inflicted with for the last 400 years. Right? And while we are in the condition that we are in today, this moribund, conflicted, or afflicted, right, genocidal condition. Again, it's deliberate, it's intentional. I can say that more often, right? Keep that in mind. They are deliberately creating conditions to keep us in an inferior condition, right? And I mean, due to our own colonized mentality, we're accepting it. We are normalizing it. We have normalized these conditions. These conditions are not right. They're not supposed to be this way, right? We're not supposed to live like this. But we have normalized as if it is normal. No, it's not normal. But it's not normal, right? And we have to raise our own consciousness, raise our own understanding of who we are as a people, and not be accepting of this, right? As House Week says, they want you to suffer. They want you to suffer peacefully, right? Let's understand what's going on here. Okay. And so for us, it's important that we recognize that our struggle is one, again, it is a marathon, it's not a sprint, right? We got to reach out to our young people, who, particularly those in the street trades out there in the streets, right? To make them recognize that they are functioning in a capacity that is reminiscent of the KKK, right? In terms of they're doing the work of the KKK, right? Ensure that our people are held in conditions of drug laden, right, in our communities. They bring in the drug and give it to us, and we sell it to each other. What kind of stupidity is that, right? What kind of thinking is that? We're destroying our own community. We're weakening our process for liberation, independence, and abolition, right? And so we must raise the conditions of our community, raise the conditions of our young people, that they have to be either an emancipator, an abolitionist, or a liberator. I'll make the three words again. You become emancipated. You must emancipate ourselves and our people from our thinking as being slaves, right? We have to abolish the system of white supremacy, right? Let me make this point. It's clear. Anything and everything that dehumanizes, degrade, and devalues Black people, brown people, indigenous people, abolish it. If that's what it does, abolish it. Move to abolish it. Move to eradicate it. Move to neutralize it. Right? Become abolitionists. Abolish it. That's what abolition means, right? To abolish, to end it, to terminate it. Okay? So anything that dehumanizes, degrades, and diminish our value as a people, we should work to demolish it, to abolish it. And lastly, become liberators. We have to liberate our minds, right? As my book says, right? We are our own liberators. Keep that in. That's the slogan. We are our own liberators. If we don't, who else will? No one else will. We have to liberate ourselves. I make this other point, how much I believe this, right? Last year, I went to Greece, Athens, Greece, for the International Symposium on Political Prisoners, right? And in the course of my presentation in Greece, I told Europeans straight up, so you cannot be free until Black people are free. You will not be free until Black people are free, right? The world will not be free until Black people are free, all around the world. When you look any place in the world, you find Black people are being downtrodden. I don't care if you go to Australia. I don't care if you go to Germany. I don't care if you go to Latin America, Mexico, Canada. Wherever you see Black people, they're in the lowest rung in social development, social economic development of their social order. Why is that? Why is that? Why do they hate us like this? Right? Why do they want to keep us in this condition? Okay, and so and understand that history, as I told you before, where it comes from, right? The doctrine of discovery, 1492. That's the origin of these conditions of contemporary times, at least the last 400 years, right? At least 500 years, right? Doctrine of discovery, to the Monroe Doctrine, to this idea of exceptionalism of the United States imperialism, right? They have to have a people that can use for slave labor, right? Menial and manual jobs, right? And that's us. And it's time for us to move out of that system, move out of this condition, right? It's time for us to divorce ourselves from a system of capitalist imperialism, a system of white supremacy. All right. Anybody, is there any questions?
Yes, sir. Brother here asks, how can we support the elder? Do you have any kind of cash app or anything, brother, that I can put up in here where the people can support you, because they're asking here in the chat.
That's me to support me in what you're talking about financially.
Yeah, I'm assuming. Yeah, that's what the him. Yep.
Well, listen, brothers and sisters, I appreciate the offer, but you know what I prefer for you to do? Buy the book. Buy the book. Go to blackdragonmme.com, buy the book. Right? It's $36. Right? $30 for the book, $6 for shipping and handling. Right? Buy the book. Share the book with others. I get others to also to buy the book. Okay. I do have a cash app. It is Jalil. Is money sign Jalil 69. Money sign Jalil 69. But I would prefer that you purchase the book, because it goes longer. It goes further. Right? It extends the ideas, what we're trying to disseminate across this country, and build the kind of movement that we need to build. Right? The decolonization programs, building the People's Senate, and building forming a front for the liberation of the African nation. I started talking about the front for liberation. I started talking about what happened in Detroit in 1968. Right? 500 activists, Black nationalists, organized a meeting in Reverend Franklin's church, right? And as a result of that meeting, one of the younger brothers there, that many have heard the name of, at 15 years of age, was Mutulu Shakur, the great Dr. Mutulu Shakur, right, was there. And he helped assist, ensure that certain people didn't get murdered when the conference they had was raided by the police. But as a result of that conference, these individuals decided they're going to build what they call the Provisional Government of New Africa, the Provisional Government Republic of New Africa. Why? Because the Black Belt South is still the traditional homeland of African people in this country, right? And I'm talking about South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, right? Black Belt South, which is still the majority of our people that live and reside in those territories, right? Now, keep also in mind that there are sovereign nations within this nation, within this corporate government, right, that we call the United States of America, right? Sovereign nations, although they're not being able to function as greatly as they would like to as being sovereign nations, right? The question for me is, how come we're not? How come we're not a sovereign nation? How can we not move towards sovereign nation? Because they prevented us from doing so. Keep in mind this. In 1867, when they promulgated the 14th Amendment, right, they imposed citizenship on the free Africans of 1865. 2 years later, they imposed citizenship, 14th Amendment, right? They didn't ask us. We didn't get a plebiscite vote. They didn't determine whether or not, we didn't get asked whether or not we want to go back to Africa. We didn't get determined whether or not we want to be part of this experiment called United States, right? We didn't get asked whether or not we want to build our own nation, have a national territory, build our own nation. That's another point I got to raise, and they understanding why we're saying we need to do so now, right? We didn't have the opportunity. This so-called second-class citizenship was imposed upon us, right? When do we make a decision for ourselves as a people? When do we have the opportunity to do so? We have to create the opportunity. We have to make the opportunity. They're not going to give it to us. All right? And so let me just go back just a little bit more in history so we understand the dynamics of what brought us to where we are today. With the Emancipation Proclamation, 1861, 1862, the Emancipation 1863, Emancipation Proclamation, there's three issuing of the Emancipation Proclamation, right? The 1863 Emancipation Proclamation, the last one, right? A civil rights general named General Sherman, General Tecumseh Sherman, issued what's called Field Order Number 15. If you don't know about it, Google it. Field Order Number 15. And Field Order Number 15 established homeland, right, from St. John's, South Carolina, St. John's, South to the Florida Basin, will be in control of the newly emancipated slaves, African slaves, right? And that started the process for us to build what we call freedom bureaus. We started creating the decolonization programs, what I call today, right? These freedom bureaus began creating the institutions of self-governing during that period of time, right? And the emancipated slaves was protected by Yankee forces, right? To ensure that the Confederates could not go into those areas, go into those territories, liberated territory, all right? It was governed by African people, emancipated slaves. See, they don't teach us in history, all right? However, years later, when they had the Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden running for president, right? Rutherford B. Hayes won the college votes, right? The collegiate votes, right? Where Tilden won the popular vote, right? The popular vote. And so they had to compromise themselves in terms of who's going to become the president. It's called the Hayes-Tilden Compromise, right? And so what happened was that Tilden asked Hayes, listen, remove the troops from the emancipated territory and you can have the presidency. And that's what he did. He removed the Yankee troops from the emancipated territories. And you know what happened? 100 years of lynching. 100 years of lynching, right? The Confederates became who? Ku Klux Klan, right? That's Confederates. And they're still fighting today, right? Still fighting today, right? 100 years of lynching. And that started the first migration out of the South, the African migration out of the South to the North and to the West. First migration, major migration. We used to get away from the people, right? Because it was killing us, right? And that's why we find ourselves dispersed across Turtle Island today, a result of that compromise, the Hayes-Tilden Compromise, the result of 100 years of lynching that we have suffered in this country. They don't teach this history. That's the reason why they're arguing against the critical race theory, or so-called critical race theory. Critical race theory is nothing but truth-telling. That's all it is, right? But they don't want their young people to understand how barbaric they have been, their history is, how savage their history is, right? where they're killing babies, black babies, where they and other cities that we had that we was in control of. They destroyed them. Mass murder. Riots didn't come from black people. The original riots came from white people, rioting against black folks. That's where the original word comes from, right? During the red summer of 1919. See? But we don't understand our history. We don't understand our struggle against struggle resistance. And so keep in mind why we don't. Remember, it was against the law to teach black people to read. Remember that? Against the law. And we have to fight that, right? And so we find ourselves today being taught a history that excludes us out of history, right? We wiped out of history, right? That's the course of our struggle. We have to reassert our personhood, our peoplehood, right? And the course of our struggle, the course of our resistance. Years and years of resistance. From the great Reverend Nat Turner to the great sister Harriet Tubman, to Robert Williams, who wrote the book Negroes with Guns, right? To the Deacons of Defense, to the African Blood Brotherhood, to the movement of Marcus Garvey, right? The movement of Elijah Muhammad, NOI, the movement of the Black Panther Party, and the Republic of New Africa, right? And so they established in 1968 that they're going to move towards building the Republic of New Africa, right? And that's how I identify myself, right? I am a member, a citizen of the Republic of New Africa. I denounce being a member or a citizen of this country, Turtle Island, who has been engaged in the process of genocide against Black, brown, and indigenous people in this country. I divorce myself from that, right? I do not support it. I do not live towards it. As a matter of fact, I live in the opposition to it, right? Being an emancipator, an abolitionist, and a liberator. If we don't liberate ourselves, no one else will.
That's beautiful, sir. I just thank you for coming on Baba TV and giving us this very, giving yourself, because we need to see you. We need to see resistance. 50 years, family, and listen to him. He just as strong in spirit as ever. Had to endure that. I can't even imagine. I can't believe I could do a day or two without losing my damn mind. And having to go through this for 50 years, and this brother came through all of this and is still able to give us some information. It made him so strong in this. Sir, I am so thankful for you. We always want to continue to hear from our Baba Jalil Muntaqim. We always want to continue to hear from our elder and brother, and I want to stay in communication with you. I come to Rochester quite frequently. I'm in Syracuse. I'm right up the street from you. Yes, sir. I'm in Syracuse all the time. And if I could, a great Dr. Khaled used to say that our people are a people of rhythm, soul, and spirit, and so that he said that the information. He said when you teach black people, it must not only be based on information, but it must be based on inspiration. So what I would like to do is end this off, sir, with some burning spear. And this one says, rise and shine. Peace and black power. Peace and black power.
Peace and black power, brother. Peace and black power.
This is a cry of a people.
How we do, brothers? All right? All right. Okay, my brother, I'm going to check out. I gotta go fix my dinner. I'm hungry. Been fasting all day.
Okay, let's rise. We're gonna rise and shine. This is a cry of a people who for over 400 years have been enslaved in mental bondage. A people who with their blood, their sweat, their tears, and their hands, they built great cities of Babylon. Only to be paid with the wages of the wicked, the sword, and the gun. Women down in the poverty much too long. Women down in the slavery oh so long. Women down in humility much too long. Women down in the valley oh so long. So we're gonna rise and shine and win your liberation. For now's the time when all nations must be free. So rise and shine, restore your strength and power. Waste no more time, remember your history. Women down in the poverty much too long. We've been down in humility oh so long. We've been down in the suffering much too long. We've been down in humiliation oh so long. We are gonna rise and shine and win your liberations. For now's the time when all nations must be free. Rise and shine. For the sake of the young generations, putting hands and hearts in the mind to brotherhood and unity. We're gonna rise and shine. Restore your strength and power. Waste no more time. Waste no more time. Remember your history. Don't repeat it. Just rise and shine. In the morning sun that surrounds you, it's international morality time, where mankind must be born anew. Rise and shine. Yes, we're gonna rise. Yes, we're gonna rise. Yes, we're gonna rise. 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 Oh yes.